G'day there viewers and welcome to the third and final installment of AFL Access's mid-season club-by-club reviews. If you haven't already tuned in, myself along with Ryan and Joel have been taking you through your two clubs each week as they go through their respective bye weeks. Today I'll be talking you through North Melbourne and GWS, two teams that find themselves on opposite ends of the ladder, although climbing for North Melbourne I suppose in recent weeks. But we'll start with the top of the table team the higher on the ladder team in GWS. So without further introduction, let's get started. After beating the very team we'll be going through later on in this video in North Melbourne last week, just before they enter their bye round, the GWS Giants currently sit in second place, sitting pretty with a healthy 9-4 record. Through 13 games, they're the only team so far to have toppled the top of the table Geelong Cats, although losses to Fremantle, Adelaide and West Coast have somewhat blighted their run and cast some doubts over whether they're able to actually beat genuine top 8 contenders. When they return from their bye, GWS is set to face Essendon, Brisbane, Richmond and Collingwood in a run that's shaping up to sort of be season-defining for them, I suppose. This time of year is usually season-defining for most teams, but certainly for them needing to get some wins against quality opposition on the board again. So with these reviews, I've been trying to find things that are right with each team and things that have gone wrong for each team at this point of the season. And so far, through the first 13 games, the Giants are arguably statistically the most sound team in the competition with how they've sort of racked up numbers and rankings. There's not much that they do poorly in terms of stats and a lot that they do well. While some teams are fine with letting the opposition control the ball, the Giants are clearly a team that loves to have it in possession, win it first, and control tempo themselves by owning possession of the footy. This shows in their top place rankings for both kicks and marks in the AFL. They're also top 5 in overall disposals, 3rd in clearances, and 2nd for points on the board. So you can see how much the Giants love to control the footy once they've got it in their hands. And it's kind of easy to see why when you consider the amount of talent that they have using the footy. Guys like Lachie Whitfield, who obviously is missing weeks because he's injured, Stephen Coniglio, and also Tim Taranto, who I'll talk a bit more about later on in this video as our player in focus, I suppose you could call it. You can see why they really like to have the footy in their hands, use it sharply and sort of control the ball and enter deadly, give deadly entry to what is a seriously deadly forward line with guys like Jeremy Cameron, Toby Green's just coming back, and even youngster Brett Daniels has showed some stuff. So clearly a team that really loves to control the ball and have possession most of the time. Being that statistically sound, I actually found it tough to sort of find things that went wrong for the Giants, but I sort of went away from statistics here and I thought, what do they actually do that is something that is a bit of a blight on their game? And it's actually playing in big games. We've talked about this on our weekly show Footy Rivals quite a bit, about how the Giants don't step up in front of big crowds. I know Ryan actually did some research into it, and it's got nothing to do with the ground being the MCG or the dimensions or anything. It's kind of similar to their ground. So it's really just big game pressure. There's been games where they've lost to top 8 opposition in terms of West Coast, Adelaide and Fremantle, but the ugliest loss so far in their season came against Hawthorn, where they really had a chance to put some MCG hoodoo behind them, and they just couldn't do it. It just became something like, I believe, a 40-point loss, near a 7-goal loss. And it was ugly, and it's still kind of a lingering loss for them, even though 2 weeks later they did beat Melbourne there. To come out with that hapless sort of game style, it's casting a lot of question marks over whether GWS are going to be genuine in the finals, or if they're going to be sort of one and done or a straight set side. Also for GWS, their fourth quarters just haven't been great. They've sort of struggled. They fell away against Adelaide, they fell away against Fremantle. Even in wins, they've sort of let teams come back a little bit on them. It's been a funny team to watch because with such class, you think maybe if they're going to outclass their opponent, that they would just run away with fourth quarters, but they sort of slump in them, and they're a hard team to sort of track where they're at from quarter to quarter, game to game in that sense. Zeroing in on a player in focus for the Giants, I mentioned Tim Taranto earlier, and he's somewhat overshadowed and doesn't really get the love that I feel Tim Taranto's due for what he does for this midfield, because guys like Josh Kelly and Stephen Canilio and even Jeremy Cameron up front, they're sort of spotlight thieves, let's be honest, with how good they can be. But Tim Taranto, as a third-year player, has been an absolute barometer for this club. He's 5th in the AFL in total tackles, which in itself shows that he's the one that puts the pressure on other sides when they really need to get physical. And also, I believe he's something like 6th in the league in disposals. So to have Tim Taranto firing like this, I mean, he's essentially filled the vacant hole left by the departing Dylan Shiel, which has been huge for the Giants, given that was such a question mark for them coming into the season as to who would fill that role. He stepped up and done a beautiful job. In my overall grading of the Giants, it was tough. I mean, these gradings have traditionally been tough for me throughout the course of these mid-season reviews, but this one in particular was hard because given how ultra impressive and then ultra lackluster this team can be, it's tough to get a gauge on where they are. Given that they can absolutely whip mediocre opponents and do it in a way that makes you think, wow, the Giants are a real standout, and then get absolutely thwarted by top 8 opposition, just like their travel to the west to play West Coast. And they were coming off a huge win then over, I'm sorry, I can't remember who they beat in round 1, but they're coming off a huge win. I think it was Essendon. They were favourites to beat West Coast, or if not favourites, touted to beat them, and they get thumped. So it makes it really tough to grade a side that can just be different from week to week. That's why I'm going to give the Giants a B. They're in second spot. They're still impressive enough to say, hey, halfway through the season we're second on the ladder. That'll probably change if Collingwood can get a win coming out of their bye and bump them back to third or potentially fourth maybe. But a B for them so far is more as I don't really know what to grade them. The jury is still out. They could improve and get some consistency and show me that they're actually an A or an A plus even, or they could fall away and show me they're a C minus if they can't beat top 8 opposition, which has proved to be the case so far. So I'm giving the Giants a B. That carries us through to North Melbourne, one of the teams that's had more than its share of headlines surrounding it through the season, but has actually also had a spike in form in the last month, having won 3 of their past 4. North, obviously the big story is the axing, the somewhat premature axing of Brad Scott. And I mean, well, if we're going to call it a departure, we need quotation marks because I feel like he was kind of pushed out the door there. It was funny because, you know, they had been so lackluster. 2 straight losses, I believe they were to Geelong, and then Sydney forced Scott basically to depart the club. They come out on his departure game, his final game. They beat the Bulldogs, and it sparks a run of 3 straight wins that weirdly has them only 2 wins outside the top 8, and mathematically in finals contention for a side that had looked so poor early on. Trying to find something that North had done right so far this season was simply looking at the scores they've put on the board. They're a team that, even though they're down the bottom of the ladder, can score. They're 4th for points overall at the moment. I believe after the bye rounds are done this week, that might turn to 7th or 8th. It's quite close around that mark, but even 8th is fine for putting a score on the board. To say you're a top 8 team in terms of offense is really good. They're also 4th in goal assists per game. So when they move in waves, everyone sort of gets a touch when you're running. Cunnington, Zeebel's return to the midfield, which again we've spoken about on Footy Rivals, has been prolific for them. So for North to be competitive in that sense, and also have young kids like Simpkin get involved, or Jamont, who's been serviceable. You know, Goldstein sort of hit some form again later on. When they move the ball in waves, they're capable of putting a score on the board, which just makes them competitive in games. However, in terms of what's gone wrong, what doesn't make them competitive in these games is their lack of defense. Yes, you can score all you like, but if the opposition is putting up more points, which tends to happen with this North Melbourne team, you're getting well beaten. So if I'm going to sit here and heap praise on North Melbourne for their ability to score and put points on the board, I suppose it's only fair that I sit here and criticise their ability to defend and stop the opposition putting points on the board. But it's not just their ability stopping the score, where they rank, I believe, 18th in the competition. They're also 17th in tackles, 18th in marks and 18th in kicks, which just means they're not controlling any footy, but also not putting any pressure on. So when you look at North Melbourne, it's a team that's got vast improvements to make in any defensive aspect, let alone, it's fine to be offensively sound. But if you're going to leak points the way North have, then you're just not going to win games of football. It's that simple. In terms of standout individuals for North Melbourne, it's impossible to go past Ben Cunnington and the season that he's put together for the Kangaroos. He's an absolute chance to be an All-Australian. I think it's the first time he would make it. He's about to hit his 200th game milestone. If he hasn't already hit it, I might have been reading that news late. But Cunnington has been an absolute force in this midfield. He ranks 4th in effective disposals and 3rd in clearances in the league, and he's effectively propelled North Melbourne to a point where they're at least better than the absolute bottom tier of the league in the Gold Coast and Carlton. Even though, yes, they were supposed to be better than those teams, it didn't look like it was going to be that way early on, and his form has really been the barometer for this club the entire season. When giving North Melbourne a grade, it should be counted that, to be fair, outside of their own supporters, no one really thought they would light the world on fire this season. So expectation wasn't overly high, and when you consider 5 wins at the midway point of the season, it's probably where they wanted to be, although they've gotten there in some awkward circumstances, having let Brad Scott go. That's really what's shadowing their entire season at the moment, is the fact that Brad Scott left prematurely to when they would have wanted him to leave. They had no intention of getting rid of their coach midway through the season, and even though the results have picked up with Rhys Shaw taking over as interim coach, it's still something that they did not plan to do or want to go through. They thought in-house that they would be better than what they are or what they had been, and that solely makes grading them a little hard. But at the same time, you can't be too harsh on North Melbourne, given that they weren't really expected to be a top 4 team or anything like that. I'm going to give them a C-. They avoid the D for their recent run of form, but the C- comes simply because of the Brad Scott departure, or whatever you want to call it. However, in terms of results, like I just said, they may be where they want to be, and being only 2 wins away from finals is actually a huge achievement for this club, or 2 wins outside of the top 8, I should say. So there you have it. That's my mid-season reviews on both the Giants and North, and indeed our mid-season reviews here at AFL Access for the bye weeks. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments, whether you agree or not, or you've got differing opinions on the Giants or North. And also be sure to join our server on Discord, where you can join in the conversation. We, have a chat through games, let us know what's on your mind in the footy world. If you did like the video, please leave a big thumbs up and be sure to ring the bell to receive notifications after you've hit subscribe to the YouTube channel of AFL Access. We'll still be running our weekly show, Footy Rivals, and there will also be plenty of other videos to keep you entertained throughout the week and plenty of upcoming content to check out. So just make sure you subscribe and, like I just said, ring that bell and you'll be the first to hear. Thanks for watching. This has been your AFL Access.